Hey everybody, welcome to the SaaS Founder Show. Tony Zayas here, joined by Andy Halco. Andy, how you doing? You wearing your snowshoes today?
I am. I've got my snow boots on and my galoshes, as I like to call them, and I'm doing fantabulous. A little bit of snow out there. How about you?
Yeah, trying to stay alive out there. I was shoveling last night, and my wife called me, and I told her I was taking a little heart attack break, and don't run over my body if she came home while I was. But
Yeah, this year I decided to invest in a flamethrower to just
there you go.
Go that way instead of going for pushing. I go for melting.
There you go. That's not a bad idea. So cool. Well, this week we have an awesome guest, and it's someone who we know pretty well because we've been working with him pretty closely over the past few months here. And we have Mark Strzok from MobileLocker, founder of MobileLocker. So let me bring Mark on, and we can start our conversation. How you doing, Mark?
Doing well. How are you guys?
Awesome. Thank you for joining us. We appreciate you being here, and look forward to talking. I think you have a pretty interesting story. And like I said, we've been working with you, so we know a little bit more about you than some of the guests that we've had on that we're just meeting. So do you mind sharing with everybody a little bit about MobileLocker, what you guys do?
Yeah, so MobileLocker is a sales enablement platform for the pharmaceutical industry. And what that lets a sales and marketing team do is put everything they need in one place.
Yeah.
So all the content, all the videos, things like that. Put it all in one place and let their salespeople and their marketing team access it. So when they're engaging with healthcare professionals, they have access to everything and they can easily share it, and it tracks how they're using it so that they can improve the materials and hopefully, make more sales.
Yeah, that's very cool.
So I always go ahead, Tony.
No, I was just gonna go ahead, Andy.
Well, I was going to say, I always like to start with origin story. So, we're all a little bit of superheroes here when you start a business in some ways. So what's the origin story? How did you get started? And, how did you get into building MobileLocker?
Yeah, so it started, let's see, I started my career at Johnson & Johnson almost 20 years ago. And after a couple years, I was in IT. Two business partners and I left to start a company called Kazam Interactive. So we were building websites and, doing advertising for pharmaceutical companies like Johnson & Johnson, and other clients like that. And when the iPad came out, one of our clients said, "Hey, can you build us an app that will let me put all of my content on this new thing called the iPad?" And, so my reps all around the country will have that when they go meet with doctors. So that's kind of how it started. It started as like a project we built for a specific pharmaceutical company. And at the time, I was the CTO of Kazam, and it was kind of my baby. And so I kind of got excited about it and kind of saw it growing into more of a product than just something that we did kind of, for one client. So I kind of built it out as a software as a service product. We signed up a few other companies, and kind of grew from there. But it was always kind of a side business for Kazam because we were really just a digital agency, and the MobileLocker was just a small part of it. And then we were lucky enough to sell Kazam to a larger New York agency in 2012. And so I stayed with them for a couple years. And then when I decided to leave, they didn't really know what to do with MobileLocker. So I bought it back from them. So I bought it back in 2016 and have been kind of growing it ever since, independently of that company as well. So it's kind of a strange story, but it's been pretty exciting.
That's great. So how do you balance being a startup founder of the technology side of it? If you were CTO, I know that you do a lot of the development work. How have you found that balance in starting the company of, being focused on tech and product, but then also obviously having a lot of other aspects of the business on your plate?
Yeah, that's been probably the most challenging part of me as growing as an entrepreneur. I learned a lot of that back at Kazam. I kind of had a mentor of my business partner, Tom Murata, kind of mentored me in a lot of that, the other sides of the business than just the tech. So, over the last couple of years, I've really kind of had to focus on that, still doing the tech because we were purposely a small company. So I still have my hands in the product and the tech side of it, but also doing sales and marketing and, all the other things that go with growing a business. That's really been kind of a learning experience as we've gone on.
Yeah, one of the first books I read, and I always go back to this. It literally was one of the first business books I read was E-Myth, which was all about, you go into a business and you have a skill. And when I started out, I did a lot of development and design and stuff as well. But it talked about how, even if you're a bread maker, when you start a business, you're not going to be making bread. You're going to be hiring, you're going to be doing all the other stuff. And the biggest evolution for a business owner is being able to take that on and being able to evolve. Have you, what's been some of your processes or tactics to evolve your skill set and, mentality as you've had to change your role within the business?
Yep. So I think the biggest one was finding people I trust that I could bring on board who are better at things than I am. So I brought on a business partner named Bob, who's kind of leading sales, because I knew I wasn't very good at sales and it wasn't my strength, but I knew we had to have a strong sales function. I brought on a marketing person named Rachel. So really kind of finding people who kind of complement me and bring different skill sets to the table that could help us grow the business like that. And trying to step back and not always be day to day. That's still hard because we are a small company, and that's on purpose. But so I still am involved with the product, but certainly moving away from it and trying to think more strategically and work on the business rather than in the business has been something I've been working on the last couple of years.
Yeah, in my entrepreneurial groups, I think that phrase "on the business" versus "in the business" is muttered daily by almost any founder or anybody that's in that position.
Yep.
So, Mark, talking about people, has there been any others that have come through that maybe didn't work out so well?
There's definitely been some challenges the last couple of years. The first year, after I got MobileLocker back, I tried to kind of do everything myself and learned very quickly that I wasn't able to do that. So I cycled through a couple different salespeople brought on as contractors to try to grow the business through outbound and inbound, and just kind of trying a lot of different things, and it wasn't really working because I think we were casting our net a little too wide. We were trying to be a general purpose sales enablement platform, even though our core competency and our existing client base was more on the life sciences and pharmaceutical side of the business. So trying to cast my net too wide, trying to do too many things, had a couple different folks cycle through that just didn't work out, and it ended mutually. It just wasn't the right fit. But that's something I learned too, is trying to find the right people. I think you first have to define the goals and the responsibilities and really figure out what the objectives are before you bring someone in to just try to do it. And that's kind of one of my biggest learnings.
Heading back to that origin story of yours, I'm kind of curious, that transition and what the biggest challenge was for you of kind of going from, being in the agency space and working as part of a business, and then transitioning out to taking a product and, really being on your own and evolving something in that direction. So I'm just kind of interested in that period of time for you and what that transition was like, both emotionally and some of the challenges that maybe you faced.
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge, so towards the end of Kazan, we probably had about 35 people. And, I was kind of running that team after we had been acquired, a big part of that team. And so I always had a group of people I could bounce ideas off of. We had designers on staff who could come up with things. We had copywriters, so you could write the text that went on the website. So having that team of people who were also my friends too, that was probably the biggest challenge, was leaving that crew that we had kind of grown with over the last 5-6 years, and kind of setting up shop as really with myself to start with. And still trying to maintain these large contracts with these pharma companies that were already in process. And so it was really kind of getting used to being kind of a solopreneur, knowing that I was eventually going to grow the team again and build that out, but really trying to get off the ground with, funding it just from revenue, not trying to dip into my savings or raise venture. So that was kind of another challenge, was trying to grow it organically, really. Trying to keep it from, slow and steady, but I think that was another challenge as well.
It's interesting to me in talking to other SaaS founders of that mentality of growth, of getting capital, bootstrapping, family and friends, and these different approaches. And I think it's as much as a business decision and like logical decision as an emotional decision. How do you look at the world of like raising capital and aggressiveness for growth, and what's your kind of mentality on that aspect of growth?
Yeah, for me, it definitely is a personal decision not to raise capital. I think it's probably, realistically, we could probably be a lot bigger if I went out and found VC funding or found a large partner. But it's just a personal decision that I like having, I guess, control. I like not having any overlords or masters I have to report to, and kind of being able to do my own thing. I certainly have some advisors who kind of, help me out and kind of guide me through some different things on an informal basis, not, formally like a board or anything. But that's, it's certainly, for a lot of people, raising capital is the right way to go. Just to, given my situation, I just have chosen to kind of probably keep it smaller than it would be, but keep it all under my control, so that eventually, when we do have the success we're aiming for, that it will be between me and my business partner to have all that, to gain all of that.
Yeah, Mark, I was going to ask, going back to, your agency was acquired, and MobileLocker was essentially a product that you guys had there. Mm-hmm. As you made the decision to go ahead and purchase MobileLocker, buy it back, what was your vision for what you would do with that? And then it's like part two of that, how does that compare to where things are at today?
Sure. So when I was deciding to leave Kazam, we sold Kazam to a company called Inventive Health. And they're a big, holding agency. They had probably a couple dozen other agencies underneath them. When I decided to leave, I always kind of knew that they didn't really get MobileLocker. They didn't really understand it, and it wasn't going to be. It was probably just going to be shut down if I had left it there. So knowing that they just, they didn't have the team in place to manage it afterwards. So when I decided to leave, I basically saw it as a way for me to continue my journey of having something to work on by myself, at least to start another product, because I hadn't come up with any other good product ideas. And I knew I wanted to do a software as a service. I knew I wanted to have a product. And this was kind of one that already had revenue. It already had clients. Not big enough revenue to be interesting to Inventive, but certainly for someone striking out on their own, funding it themselves, it was very profitable from day one. So that was always my goal, was to have something that could kind of get me going again. And if I came up with some other idea, great. If I didn't, and I kept going with MobileLocker, because it was still pretty exciting to me. There was a lot of tech involved. The problem space is huge. And so I kind of saw it as a way that it would probably be the next 10 or 15 years of my life when I left. And that's kind of where I think it still is going.
I think we learned so much from our, challenges and even mistakes. And so, as a startup person, in that first year that you left and you started that business, when you look back, what were, some of the biggest challenges you faced, and, how'd you overcome those?
Yeah, I think the first big challenge was trying to kind of keep a couple of my clients that I probably shouldn't have. There were a couple clients that just weren't good fits. After I made the transition, and I did everything I could to kind of customize the product to fit their business case, when in reality that wasn't going to be a good long-term strategy for the product and for the company. So that was probably one of them. The other one was, like I said, I kind of cast my net too wide once I decided to, go broad and try to, boil the ocean and make MobileLocker work for any sales team. So, cycling through, having someone do outbound sales calls, and doing that from scratch with no kind of understanding of how to make a good outbound sales call, how to incentivize them, how to measure them, and just kind of flying blind. That was kind of one of my big mistakes. that first year, I think.
That's another thing. You're a technical founder, so and I'm a code junkie myself, and I love like the idea of features, and I get excited by new ideas. I always say I have that shiny key syndrome. And if for you just mentioned with product features and customizing. How do you approach when customers bring new ideas or you have new ideas internally for the roadmap of the product and balancing what's right, for the product and for growth?
Yeah, so a lot of the things we've added to the product have come from our clients, but it's never a one-off where this will only work for one client, has no applicability to our other clients. Because most of our clients are pharmaceutical companies, and because of my background in that industry, I have a pretty good sense of what works for them and what will be valuable to other companies like them. So when we approach new products or new features, when someone asks, "Hey, can you make MobileLocker do this?" You go through the questions of, "Hey, why? How will that help you? Who will that help in your organization? What do you expect your outcomes to be?" And then I kind of start thinking about, how do I make that a general enough feature to work for other companies like them, and how do I roll it out in a way where they understand it, where it's easy to use. Obviously, not everybody, especially in pharma, will want to take advantage of all the features the platform has. So you have to make sure that you kind of turn it on just for the clients who want it, and then teach the others about it, and to see if they need it. But then some of those features become some of the biggest selling points for the platform, which especially the case since COVID. Some of the ideas we added last year that nobody really was using when we added them, since everyone's working remote now, are all of a sudden like, oh, wow, this is great, and it's completely changed the game for our business.
That's cool. Talking about, you guys are a small business. You play in a market that, the sales enablement world, where there are some big players in there. What is some advice that you would have and ways you've navigated those waters in taking, the size of your business and using that as an advantage?
Yeah, so you're right that we definitely play in, we're a small fish in a big pond. Some of our bigger competitors have 800 employees, some have 400, 100 million in funding. They're funded by Salesforce's venture fund, and little MobileLocker out of Hudson, Ohio, 5 people. It's pretty small. So the biggest thing that I've found is to own that we're small, and to play that to our advantage in that we can move on it. We can change directions on a dime. We can implement new things for them. We respond very quickly. So a lot of big companies expect everything to be slow when they're working with vendors, and we're the complete opposite of that. And we were the same way when we were Kazam. We played to our strength that we weren't a big New York agency. We were a small team, and we'll get things done very quickly. So I think that's the biggest value we have as a small company, is that we listen to our clients. We know all of our clients very intimately, and we can change things, we can improve things, we can help them. We can jump on a call and train if they have a couple new reps, and we can just jump on a call the same day and train them. They don't have to go through an account manager. They don't have to wait for training. They don't have to pay for extra for training. So being the small company certainly has its advantages, especially when it comes to responsiveness and really listening to your customers.
Talk about that aspect of the business, and I think that a lot of software founders go through this, because we see it a lot when we talk to folks, is taking a product that you have and trying to expand the audiences, because you get all these ideas and you think, oh, anybody could use this. And it seems like you've now evolved to come back to being more of a niche focus. So talk about that evolution, because I think a lot of software founders struggle with that, is, staying narrow and staying focused, and versus wanting to really expand and, take on any opportunity that they can.
Yeah, I think that was one of my challenges, especially coming from the agency world, where you kind of do whatever your client wants. Hey, build us a website that does this, build us an app that does that, update the website or the app to make it do this now. I kind of had that mentality start early on. And so there were some features and, parts of the platform we added because they were cool or because I thought it was going to go somewhere, but it was kind of a completely different direction than where we were already based. And, kind of really since COVID, kind of realizing that being spread too thin, especially in part of the platform with, trade shows, there was this whole set of features and functions that we added that was going to be valuable to people who go to trade shows. Well, trade shows died, so very quickly we're like, well, shit, that part of the business is, out of order, at least for the next, 12 months. So trying to realize that, you can go really wide, and then you're competing, toe to toe with the big players. We integrate with Salesforce, they integrate with Salesforce. We do this, they do this. And we're just playing, we're trying to catch up and play feature parity. And we're going to lose that game because they have a 30-person marketing team, and they have a whole sales team, and they have, they're always going to have, they're going to do it sexier than we would. So really getting to the realization that, sticking to what which is pharmaceutical sales organizations, was really kind of something I've learned the last couple months, and it really helped us focus back and had some tremendous growth this year, even though it's been COVID and it's been a challenging year for a lot of people. But certainly trying to go too wide with the features and the cool tech, and I saw that you can now do this in an iOS app. Let's make it do that, without answering how is that going to help our core customers, that our core customers, not our future customers that we don't have yet. How is it going to help our core customers? And that's reining it back in and kind of refocusing has been really important and really valuable.
What would be your advice, Mark, to a founder who, kind of wants to take that broad approach? We work with a lot of clients that we make that recommendation to niche down, really get focused. And a lot of times we get resistance. So we get pushback. There's kind of a concern that, but if we do that, we're going to be missing out on so much. What advice would you have? How do you deal with, that idea of feel like you're losing out on, the broader marketplace when you do narrow down?
Yeah, and I had that fear exactly. I was like, if we just focus on pharma, we're going to be missing out. But you know who your core customers are. And in the case of MobileLocker, we had paying customers paying for a specific set of benefits that they were getting from the platform. And so really trying to find one, if you're a founder and you're coming up with an idea, I think the first thing is to try to validate it, get one or two customers to pay for it. You're not going to try to charge an arm and a leg for it. Come in at a competitive price, make it work for them, solve a specific pain they have, and then try to find other companies like them. Don't try to add new features and bells and whistles that may or may not be valuable to that core customer. And so I think that's kind of where I went wrong in the beginning, was trying to add all the features in the world because they were cool or because I thought they would attract new customers. But part of the value, especially in B2B, especially like pharmaceuticals, a lot of the questions that always come up are, who else are you working with? Who are your logos that you have? And so if you have a lot of other companies like them, that's part kind of validates your value to them, because they say, well, the people who work for that company are similar to me in role and function and objectives and what they're trying to achieve. And if they're using MobileLocker, that's good social proof that it'll probably work for us too. So if you try to go, for example, we have a base of pharmaceutical companies. If I tried to go and then sell it to, I don't know, automotive companies, they'd be like, what experience do you have? What expertise do you have in automotive? You don't have any automotive clients. So I think trying to find one or two clients that will pay you for it, make it work for them, but don't make it too custom, because then it won't work for anybody else. But and then try to repeat and find other people like them or close enough to them is really important.
So we talked about the people thing a little bit, and that's a common topic that we get into here is, how do you find the right people and build the team and culture and all of those aspects. For you, how have you evolved and thought about, how you find the right people and how you want to grow from a standpoint of, personnel? And so how has that evolved over the last year or two for you?
Yeah, so I knew I always wanted to have a remote team. because we're based in a small suburb of Cleveland. We're not going to get big talent to come to Cleveland. There's a lot of talent here, but I always like the idea of having a remote team. Certainly, having a couple people close enough to hang out and to meet in person has been helpful. But that was one of the key things, was knowing that you can find people anywhere if you empower them and you give them the right tools to kind of collaborate and communicate every day. And the team right now, we have a daily stand-up call every day, and we're in very close contact. But as I grow, I think it'll be more about finding people who have kind of the same objectives, understanding what we're trying to achieve as far as how we're growing the business. We're not going to be going out and getting venture funding. So we're not going to be getting the Salesforce buying us for $27 billion like they bought Slack today. Kind of aligning that you want to work for a small business. It's going to be, you're going to have a lot of responsibility, and finding people who want to make a difference. And hopefully they're excited about software, and hopefully they're excited about kind of the life sciences space and helping people and sales teams grow. So that's kind of how I approach kind of trying to find the right people. And I've had good success. A lot of it's been networking. My business partner, Bob, I've actually known since I was growing up. And he's been in software sales his whole career. And I've known him since I was a teenager. And he was kind of a mentor the first couple of years. And we would meet maybe once a quarter for lunch. And he kind of helped me with some ideas and bounce things off him. And finally, it just worked out at the end of last year that it was the right time for both of us to make changes, and we came to an agreement. And he came on board at the beginning of this year, and it's been great. So it's really trying to find people that kind of have the same goals, who don't expect that you're going to be the $27 billion acquisition, but also understanding that you're going to be working for a small company. You're going to be doing a lot of things that may not be in your job description. You're going to be asked to work late. It's going to be all hours of the time, and responding to RFPs and quotes and things like that, and really trying to find people that kind of align with those goals.
How I know that fairly recently your wife has joined on board, working with you. How has that been so far, working with a spouse?
So that's been something we've always talked about. She stayed home for the first couple of years when we had kids, and she was in sales and marketing, so she's always been looking to get back into it. And so I've always wanted her to be into it, because then I could, talk about work with her more often. Whereas now, if I talk about work, she's like, or before. So it's been a lot of fun. She's still not involved probably as much as I would like her to be involved. I think she would add a lot more value if she had more time to commit to it. But certainly she's been a big part of it, and knowing her role in the past of being in sales and marketing and supporting accounts and large accounts. She's been, a key part of our growth strategy, especially as we take on these larger clients over the next this year and next year as well.
So you guys are able to kind of turn work off when you're at home?
Yeah, she has to remind me of that a lot. That's always been my challenge. Is I've always been kind of a workaholic, and she's always been like, turn it off. But it's hard to do that when you're a business owner. You can't turn it off, because everything you think about is, hey, this isn't just a job. It's how we're paying for our family. It's how we're supporting our team. It's how we're supporting our clients. And that's always been a challenge for me. And it's definitely been something we've always been working on as a couple.
Yeah, and I'm curious to keep going on that a little bit, because in the startup space, you see it a lot, but there's also a lot of people that push against it. And it seems like you've, done a number of the things that people sometimes avoid. Family, friends, and, partnerships sometimes can be challenging. You've got all three. So, what's the balance for you? How do you, what do you think the advice is for other startup folks that are looking at having past friends or family or bringing in partners? How should they look at this scenario?
Yeah. Even though, my wife works with me now, and a longtime family friend works with me as a business partner, I wouldn't suggest like bringing on your random buddies from high school. I've got a lot of friends I like hanging out with. I wouldn't want to bring them on in the business. One, because eventually you might have to, go your separate ways. And, even though my last business venture with Kazam ended amicably, we weren't always friends. We didn't start out as friends. We started off as business associates. We became friends. But bringing in family is definitely something I probably wouldn't recommend, beyond maybe your wife, or your spouse, but certainly not, your buddies or your friends from school. And, it's definitely better to find the right people for the right job. And in Bob, I found that as from the sales side and the business partner side, and my wife Katie, on the customer success side, it's the right people. And I've known them for long enough to where, even if things went south, certainly hoping that with my wife, even if things went south, we'd still be friends, and be able to separate business from our personal lives as well.
One of the things that interestingly impacted me years ago was that I had a client that it was two brothers that were partners, and some things happened in the business, and I remember the one sitting down with me and saying, I'll never talk to my brother again for the rest of my life. And so I've always had an interesting view of bringing in family members, based off that conversation, and other folks that do. But I think if folks are able to do it with metered approach, it can work.
Yeah, I have a similar scenario where I have a friend who owns a business locally, and he had to fire his brother. And that's got to be a tough situation. They've worked together for, I think, 20 years. And so I can't imagine how awkward that would be. So that's why I think it's probably better to keep it a little bit separate. Having the two separate parts of your life is probably important. But obviously you can cross that. You can work with people and still be friendly, but understand that you may not always work together and you may not always be friends. So
how do you find, again, in that startup environment, I try and think about is that, it has to be very, very agile. There do have to be some close relationships. You have to ask tough things. How do you handle the other side of it where, sometimes people aren't meeting objectives, or you're having challenges with folks? What have you learned as a technical founder to be good on that, like, people management side?
That's another part that I'm still working on. Back at Kazam, I didn't have to handle the hiring and firing. So, we had, probably 60 or 70 people work for us over the years. And, we were at 30 or 35 when we sold. So never having to fire somebody was always something I dreaded. And last year I did have to fire somebody, and that really stressed me out. I met with some friends who are in HR to kind of learn the right way to do it and the wrong way to do it legally and professionally. But it really kind of ate me up for a while, and I really was uncomfortable for it, going into it for a while. And part of it was my fault. I let the relationship, the person was in a role that they probably weren't qualified for. I let them stay too long. I didn't make the tough decision. I should have cut it off at 6 months. I should have cut it off at 8 months. Instead, I waited a year. Kind of waiting for that natural year-end point to where it was like, okay, well, what are we going to do next year? Hey, by the way, this isn't working. And they knew it wasn't working. We weren't making a lot of progress with what they were doing. But that's something I've still struggled with, is how do you make those hard decisions, have those hard conversations? And that's something I'm still working on.
Yeah, and I work with a ton of business owners, entrepreneurs. I'm in entrepreneur groups, and that is just a common challenge across the board, is that people wait too long to end a relationship that's not working, and the amount of money and time and turmoil that it costs is just, that's why I always do like the hire slowly, fire quickly mentality.
Yeah, I'm something I'm still learning. And that's why we're very careful about the hiring now. So it's, we want to make sure it's going to be the right person, not just someone to fill a spot or to accomplish a certain task. But yeah, that's a hard part about becoming a leader of a bigger organization, is you have to have those hard conversations. And I'm sure it gets easier. Maybe it gets easier. I don't know if you want it to get easier, but it does consume you a lot, and trying to do it the right way and without jerk, but also it's also right for them too. If they're not succeeding, if they're not achieving what they want to achieve, and they're just happy to kind of hang out, that's not right for their career either.
Shifting gears a little bit, Mark, I know a big part of MobileLocker is you guys have made enhancements and updates and feature sets based on a lot of input from users. But if we go back, what did the product look like in its initial iteration?
Yeah, so 2010, it was when we started working on MobileLocker. I think we got it into the App Store in early 2011. So it was really early on. And it was really just an iPad app. That was the only thing it worked on. Because at the time it was, that was the only tool that pharmaceutical companies were just looking at using when they started doing, this in-person engagement when they would meet with doctors and things. So it was very primitive. It was very much just simple list of files, and you can open them and you can download, access them, and that was really it. It had some things that kind of we saw as long-term benefits, like being able to build things interactively with HTML, so you can build stuff, not just PDF files and things like that. But that was it. And so that kind of was the first couple years of, just being on iPad was good enough. But really, since I got MobileLocker back from Inventive in 2016, is really we've kind of expanded beyond that, because one, people aren't just using iPads anymore. Now there's Windows tablets and things like that. So we've really kind of had to open it up, make it work cross-platform, make it do different things. And it was pretty primitive. The way it was set up technically was primitive, whereas now it's globally available, robust, running on Amazon, things like that. That make it a much more robust platform that I've had to kind of grow it into.
So most of that progress was made. It kind of stayed in a similar state as to the original version until you bought it back. Is that correct?
Yeah. Because part of the agreement with Inventive was I basically told them, I was like, listen, I wrote that code 5 years ago. I want the name and the trademark. I don't need the code because I'm going to rewrite all the code. So I didn't even want the code back. I started from scratch basically with everything I'd learned and everything I wanted to add to the platform. And kind of 5 years is a long time in tech. So the way you build something 5 years ago is not the way you build it today. And I had a good enough understanding of how to build it as a platform versus just a product, to where it would be easy to add things on and make it grow and adapt. Because that's what I had been doing at Kazam, was building platforms for these different companies. But yeah, so a lot of it's been the last couple of years, and really accelerated the last 18 months.
Did you have a user base that went with it when you purchased it?
Yeah, so that was part of the reason I wanted the name, the product name MobileLocker, and the trademark, was because I knew if I changed the name of the product, the pharmaceutical companies that I had annual contracts with would have to go through IT, or they have to go through procurement and get me in their new vendor system. So keeping the name kept it simple for the users, because it's a specific icon at that time on their iPads. So yeah, I kind of that was what attracted me to it. Also, was even though the revenue wasn't significant to a multi-billion-dollar company like Inventive, to that solopreneur that I was and what I was looking to start with, it was a nice starting point. It was a nice way to kind of fund my move back to Ohio from the East Coast and kind of work on my own for as long as I wanted, and kind of start from there.
So one of the other things that I see a lot of founders struggle with, not only in the beginning but as they go, is kind of model and pricing, and this idea of how do you price it? Is it per user? Is it a fixed fee? Is it transparent pricing that you're putting on the web versus a sales process? Is there a trial or demo? How have you evolved over the time that you've had this product in thinking about that model and pricing structure? Because again, I think it's something that a lot of people struggle with, and I'm kind of curious what your journey has been along those lines.
Yeah, that's another thing that we've definitely changed about. When we were casting a wide net, we thought it was important to publish our pricing on the website. And originally it started off as one price, you get all the features, and it's just a per user fee paid annually. And so we would publish that. And we were proud of that we had simple pricing. And that then the question was the price too much or too little? And that was depending on who you were talking to, what industry they're in, how many sales reps they have, things like that. And so there weren't a lot of negotiation levers. What we've learned over the time is obviously you evolve that to like the good, better, best model, where you kind of say, hey, for feature set A, here's a couple things. For for a little bit more, you get this, a little bit more, you get that. And so we tried the good, better, best model. And where we've kind of settled lately is our clients are pharmaceutical companies. It's a longer sales process. You're not going to sign up a sales team with someone registering on your website and putting in their credit card. So publishing the price has become less important because it's going to depend a lot on length of contract, number of users, there are different use cases. And how much you want that logo, how much you want them as a client. So we've definitely gone with kind of the traditional enterprise route to where now, you can go through a demo with us. We'll show you the product. We'll talk about it, how it can help your team, and then price will come up at the end, and we'll kind of say, here's the list price, per user per month paid annually. That's our typical pricing model, and then then we negotiate, about how length of contract, 2 years, 3 years. Do you need all the features? Do you not need all the features? Do you want to pay normally we don't even charge like an onboarding cost. Some companies insist on it. They said, I'd rather pay more for the onboarding to reduce the recurring fee. So it's kind of evolved a lot more to where I didn't really want it to go. It's more the traditional enterprise route, but we're still keeping it pretty simple. It's still a per user model. It's still just the real only levers are number of users and length of contract, and occasionally the onboarding cost. But we try to avoid that because we're like, that's not a big part of it doesn't cost us a lot to onboard a team, a customer. So it's definitely something that gets a lot of attention. You're in those entrepreneur groups, and I was in a SaaS group last year, and that's a big challenge for a lot of businesses. I think it's more important for B2C companies, consumer-facing companies, where you can get people to buy on the website with a credit card, or Black Friday just happened. You can incentivize people to plop down their credit card for a year because you give them some discount. In enterprise sales, where you're trying to change the culture and how a team works, the sales process is never that simple. So the pricing model doesn't have to be that simple either, I guess.
How about that dollar figure? Was there any process equation? And I'm kind of really looking for like the thought process to get to the cost that someone would be willing to pay, the value of the product, the profit, and I know I need to make this. Was there any approach that you took to get to that number?
Yeah, so I think back when we first started MobileLocker, the price, we're very close to the price we were 10 years ago in reality. It's very similar because we were looking at, the market we play in is enterprise software. And Salesforce publishes their price, at least their list price, and that's, call it $150 a month per user. And you're like, well, if a CRM and kind of the hub of all your business is $150 a user, we can't spend that. It can't cost that much. We can't charge that much. So we got to kind of come into a number that's reasonable. It's not too much, but it's also not giving it away for free. And that's been a balance too, because I've tried lowering the price. I've tried lowering it too far to where maybe they don't perceive the value then. And so I've kind of brought it back to kind of our original price, at least as the MSRP. But there's certainly a model for it. You look at the competitors. A lot of our bigger competitors used to publish their pricing, and we were always below theirs, and so that was encouraging. And we were on feature parity with them. But then since they took on VC funding and they've become 400-person behemoths, they've stopped publishing their pricing. So it's always we've kind of gone the route of most companies, I guess, as you go through this B2B, going up market, trying to get bigger customers. You don't have to publish your pricing because pricing doesn't come up until the very end a lot. They want to see, will it work with our team? Will it add value? Will it work with will it get the blessing from IT? And sometimes they're like, oh, so what's it cost? And they're like, and then when you tell them, they're like, it's almost like insignificant to what they're spending already on a 100-person sales team. So.
Yeah, I always find that aspect interesting because I see a lot of founders struggle with it in the software space because you try and think about what your expenses will be as you scale a dev team and marketing and sales, and all these other aspects, and then what someone's willing to pay, and how you can scale them. So I think, pricing is one of those challenging things of, how do you really do it? It's as much, it has to be a science, but it also has to be a little bit of an art, right?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And certainly, because it's a SaaS business, a lot of our costs are kind of fixed. And so if we add another 100 users, it doesn't cost us much more to run it. So our biggest cost is always, people. So bringing on people will always be the most expensive part of our process. And, but the cost to run the product itself will always stay fairly flat as we scale as well.
Just to bring up this past year, right, 2020, COVID, all the changes that have come about just that affected pretty much everybody. How has that affected MobileLocker? And then I guess we could talk more about it, but how do you see that impacting things moving forward as well, even if things return, back to a normal state of affairs? I think I've seen a lot where we've seen shifts in businesses that certain trends are probably going to, we've started to do some things that I think people will continue to do. So I'm just curious.
Yeah, it is really driving a big shift in the life sciences and pharmaceutical space and the sales. So traditionally, pharmaceutical company reps would be going to doctors' offices, going to hospitals, meeting with the physicians or the office staff in person. And that was a big part of how they, encouraged the sale of their products over time. That's probably never coming back. There was already a shift where doctors were not seeing reps as often. So they were already being challenged to have boots on the ground, as it were. And that just, turned off immediately come March this past year. So that was certainly something that they kind of always expected was going to happen in the pharmaceutical space, but the abruptness of it was really a shock to them. Now it worked out well it actually worked out for us well in that regard, because a lot of the value of MobileLocker is that remote environment, sending things to a doctor, knowing when they open it, what page they're looking at, being able to do it using any of, on your Windows laptop or on your iPad or on your phone or in Microsoft Outlook was kind of already in place. So fortunately, we had a couple of clients, pharmaceutical clients, that they'd already planned to launch a new product in May. They had a $1 billion launch planned in May. And when COVID hit, all of a sudden their 300 reps were like paralyzed, and they didn't have any way to get the word out about this new product. So we helped them using MobileLocker. We were able to help them engage with these HCPs remotely in a way that was super easy for the reps to use. It worked really well. They got huge engagement numbers on it, and it really led to the successful launch of their business. So we were already kind of positioned that our platform would work well for people in person and also remote. But where it really hurt us was the other part of our business was the whole trade show aspect. Mm-hmm. And that was something we had invested a lot of time in 2019, going to trade shows, exhibiting at shows, showing people how they could use MobileLocker in all these different ways at shows. And then when that hit, we're like, well, shit, let's just pause all that. Let's not even talk about it. I think we even took it off the website because it's like, let's just figure out, that's not coming back anytime soon. So that was certainly a disruption. But then once we realized, okay, well, our core market, our pharmaceutical companies really need what we have. They need to be able to send things to a doctor and have them open it and track it and everything, and engage with them remotely and measure how it's working. And that's become more important. So it's really led to you hate to say something good came out of COVID, but it's definitely been beneficial to us as a business this year.
Our last interview that we did, we talked to the founder about selling software into the hospital system and the red tape and some of the challenges that they face. For you on selling into the enterprise space and one that, probably has some level of regulations, what is your insight or advice for folks that are, looking to sell software into a space that is more enterprise, that has more process, maybe more red tape? What are the challenges you face, and what are some of the insights that you have about that?
Yeah, so I think my background working at in a pharma company at J&J, and then for an agency, we kind of knew what questions they would ask, because there was the questions I used to ask when I was on the enterprise architecture team at J&J. I kind of knew. I think that's important to know, is what are they going to ask for? they're going to want to know things like where is it hosted, and if you answer AWS or Microsoft, a lot of the hard questions go away. So kind of building it the right way, knowing your audience of what they're going to ask for was really important, and then also making it very easy for them to find more answers. So especially selling software to a pharmaceutical company, they want to know, does it integrate with Salesforce? Does it work with our single sign-on? Is it going to be hard to deploy to our iPads? And having easy answers for all those is really important. The other benefit, I think for us specifically, and this goes back to Kazam too, is we always kind of work with the brand teams. And the brand teams are the ones who are driving the business. They're the revenue source at the company. So they're the ones who kind of, as long as they play by the rules of what they have to do, they can make a case for why we need this new product and how it's going to add value to them. So, we've never sold into the IT function at a pharmaceutical company. We always try to go in through the brand or through the sales team, the marketing team. And that was even back at Kazam. Certainly, happy to engage IT. We're going to work with them, but our product is really valuable to the brand and marketing and sales teams. And so that's where we have to really project ourselves and make sure they understand it. And then they'll go make the fight or the case for why we should bring in another sales tool into an organization, especially a large organization.
So really knowing those personas within the organizations is important for every business, but especially in that enterprise space, to know where you need to have those conversations.
Yep. Yeah. And just then you have to know that, it's going to take longer. You're not going to, like I said, you're not going to get them to sign up with a credit card. It's going to be a 30, 60, 90-day sales process. You're going to have several calls with them. You're going to have to write a lot of emails, and just kind of knowing that that's what you're signing up for when you're going into the enterprise B2B space. But, the nice thing about once you get into B2B is you become part of their culture. So in our case, a new sales rep gets onboarded at one of our clients. They come in for the first day, they're handed an iPad or a laptop, and MobileLocker is already on there. So from day one, we're part of their sales process. And you want to be sticky. You don't want to lock clients in, and in no way do we lock them in. They can always get their data out, but as long as you keep them happy and you're providing value and make it easy to work with you, from a contracting perspective, from a support perspective, and this goes back to being a small company. They don't have 15 account managers they have to talk to. They don't have to submit a ticket to get help from us. They just shoot us an email or send us a call. And we're a small team. We even have Slack channels with some of our clients that have Slack and Microsoft Teams. And so just making yourself very easy to work with, they're very appreciative of that. Whereas, they work with a big company. I think I mentioned this before. They expect things to take forever. Hey, can you make this change? And, they expect it to be like 3 months later it happens. Well, with a small company like ours, it'll happen the next day or the next week, and they love that and they're appreciative of that. And, and the other value of getting into a large company, is the people who, they're at your current client now. When they leave to go to their next company, if they leave and go to a different organization, a lot of times they'll bring you with them, because it helps them. They can say, hey, at my last company, we really succeeded by using this vendor, and they walk you in the door. And that helps you open new doors and new opportunities as well. So there's a lot of value to making yourself easy to work with, and knowing the personas, like you said, and making sure it's easy for them to do business with you.
Yeah, I think that's great. You mentioned stickiness, and we do a lot of work around retention, in that enterprise space, not locking somebody in, but creating a sticky product. But what else do you think about when you're trying to think about retention for your software, keeping users and clients?
Yeah, so I think the first part is, we have been fortunate that we've lost very few clients over the years. Some of the clients we've had for, I think, 9 years, is our longest running client at this point, because you just become part of their process. It's certainly, you want to kind of land and expand and grow into other areas of the business. And sometimes that's hard if that client's not growing. But, trying to keep them happy if something changes in their organization. Like some of our clients have been acquired since they became a client. So now you're working with a new entity who may not want to use the tools that they were using from the acquired company. And so you kind of have to sell it all over again. and then you're competing against the big players again. So that's one of the challenges. How do you keep them happy? How do you keep them growing? And certainly, you don't usually get, at least in the enterprise space and the kind of companies we work with, if COVID happens, they're not going to all of a sudden cancel all their contracts with their vendors, because they still need to sell stuff, right? Especially because we're in a revenue generating part of their business. We're not a cost center. We're helping them sell more. That's a key value prop of the product. So if we were in a cost saving area of the business, COVID would have been probably horrible for us on the enterprise side. But so retention is obviously always something you have to think about, but we don't look at it monthly. We don't worry about oh no, are they gonna subtract 5 users or 10 users? One, we also have annual contracts. Most of them or all of them are annual or longer. So you always know you have that renewal event that's going to happen. But you also have to build that into their planning. You have to know when their budget season is. When are they going to start doing forecasting for their next fiscal year, and make sure you get on their radar early enough in advance to say, hey, don't forget, we're up for renewal at such and such date. Give them enough time to get it through their process to renew as well. So that's been important as well.
Okay. What's the the future for MobileLocker? What strategies are you looking at to scale and grow the business right now? And what's the next, year, 2 years look like?
Yeah, I think the biggest one is, like we talked about, was niching down back to healthcare and life sciences and pharmaceutical specifically. So that's our biggest change. And we're going to be, updating the website and rebranding kind of some things to really focus our messaging on the value we provide to those companies. I still see that long term, MobileLocker can compete with the big players in the sales enablement space. So that's still a lofty goal for us, but not in the near, next 1 or 2 years. But I think my immediate goals is to one, stay small. I don't think I ever want to have more than 10 people on the team. I just like having a small organization. It just keeps it simple. But I think we can achieve, really high financial success and probably have a good long-term exit for the company eventually. I don't want to stop working on it right now. I don't have anything else I'd want to be doing. I still love what I'm doing every day and working with the team. But that's kind of the goal, is to really kind of focus back on our core target market and really kind of grow our penetration in that market as well.
That's great.
Awesome. Well, Mark, we are just about here at the end of the hour. So I just wanted to say thank you. This has been awesome. It's been really good to talk and go into more detail with you. I encourage anybody who's watching, if you want to check out MobileLocker.com or check out and connect with Mark on LinkedIn. And with that, guys, we will be back next week with another founder. But again, once again, thank you, Mark. Have a great day.
Thank you. Thanks, Andy. Thanks, Tony.
Yeah, thanks, Mark.
Yep.
All right, everybody have a good day.
Take care.